All right, we are live. Kabir, are you doing the intro or am I? Should have asked that.
I can do it if you like.
Am I doing the intro, Kabir? All right, cool. All right, thank you. Okay, cool. All right, thank you, everyone. I can see people are rolling in. Um, I've got my other screen open to take your questions as well. So, firstly, we've got Chris Saad here with us today. So, Chris is a friend of mine, and I want to firstly thank you for your time for being here with us. We have companies from all over APAC here with us today. So, really everywhere from seeing new markets all the way through to sort of, Singapore, Indonesia, everywhere. So I'm, I'll let you do your own intro, but I wanted to sort of start by saying that, you've co-founded companies, you've lived the Silicon Valley life. You've had that big task at Uber as head of product for their developer platform. You've lived a very, product-centric life, I think, and, now you're an advisor, you're an investor, you're a great mentor to a bunch of different companies. And I think the first thing I just wanted to I wanted to go into a little bit about like what your journey and what your favorite part has been.
Oh, favorite part. Jeez, okay.
Yeah.
Let's start with an easy question. Well, firstly, thank you for the intro. Thank you for having me, and hi everybody. Yeah, that's you just did. I guess my intro pretty well. I describe myself as a serial entrepreneur and startup and product builder. Um, Fellow entrepreneur, I guess. I been doing that for about 23, 24 years, about a decade and a bit in Australia, and then a decade and a bit in Silicon Valley, San Francisco, and the Bay Area, and then I've been back in Australia for a couple of years, doing all those things that Emily just mentioned. In terms of my favorite part of the journey, it's really hard to pick out a favorite part because there is so many surreal moments that I met my heroes and was part of breaking news and part of what I thought of as the most important company at that time, Uber, and part of some of the most important developments at Uber. And so I felt very fortunate to do all of those things. There were many, many like whoa, blow your mind moments. The two that come to mind right now maybe is when we um, had this thing called the Data Portability Project, which coined and popularized the term and the idea of data portability, the idea that users own their own data and they should be able to take it from place to place and leverage it for their own utility using open standards. That was a little idea I had with a few people, and we threw up a landing page and shared some of our thinking. But then Robert Scoble got kicked off Facebook for trying to scrape his data out with Plaxo, and it got all the media, including mainstream media, to pay attention to him and say, well, who are they to stop you from grabbing your data and what's going on here? And it's a casino and the data goes in, doesn't come out. And I had somewhat of a relationship with Robert beforehand. And so I pinged him on Twitter as this was going on. And I said, hey, I'm running this thing called the Data Portability Project. This is where the conversation is happening to solve this problem. And so he said, Chris's data portability thing is the place where this first problem is going to be solved. So all the media went from looking at him to looking at me. and I was like, oh, shh, I won't swear, but and so we went literally overnight. Well, depending on how you count, it was a lot of groundwork and work and whatever, and getting to know Robert and all these influencers. But then having that established work, literally overnight, everyone turned to me and said, and everybody signed up, like Microsoft and Facebook and MySpace and Twitter and Plaxo and all these companies signed up, and we were getting announcement after announcement. It became the biggest thing for 15 minutes, for maybe a year and a half. That everything that people were talking about Silicon Valley was about data portability. And then that was one big surreal moment and like lots of fun, 15 minutes of fame. And then the other big surreal one was out of that, I got invited to go live at Michael Arrington's house, who a lot of people may not know who he is anymore, but for a long time, he was a kingmaker. He created TechCrunch and wrote for it, was the main author for a long time. And at the time, if he wrote about you on TechCrunch, also everybody would turn their attention to you. Investors would reach out. Users would rush to check out your app. And it was a very big launching pad. He had a very important place in the ecosystem. So I got to go. He wrote very kindly about data portability. I messaged him and said, thank you. And he said, what are you doing? Come to Silicon Valley. Come live on my couch. And I did. And that was a really surreal time. I would sleep in Heather Hardy's room, office. I'll use office loosely because it was a bedroom. She was the biz dev person out of AOL who ultimately helped to get sold, and was herself quite famous in the ecosystem. And then in the mornings, I'd bleary-eyed, like rub my eyes, leave my bedroom, and she would come in and use it as her office. And just kind of watching news break and being part of all that was tons of fun and really, really surreal. So those two things that jump in, lots of other things dealing with Travis and Uber and the media firestorms there and everything, but those two came to mind.
That's amazing. I've also met Robert, and we're Twitter friends, and I remember that he shouted me out over Twitter once, and then I got like 1,000 followers overnight, and I was like, yes, because he had such influence in the in the community in Silicon Valley, and I at that point had like zero connections into the US and that market at all. So I remember that as well. The other thing that I was really when you were this is one of my favorite things. See, like this is one of my favorite things was you were in, and I'm a massive tennis fan. So you were at the Australian Open with Alexis, from who. The co-founder of Reddit, founder of Reddit, and you were watching Serena play, and I was so jealous.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. That one was a little bit just like coincidental. I was there. I got some tickets from something else, and it was for Serena. It happened to be Serena Williams, and he happened to be there. And then I said, hey, we have a bunch of friends in common, and and I said hello and introduced ourselves. So that was more of a just a bit of a random happenstance. But yeah, I really got to meet a lot of my heroes in Silicon Valley, and it was very surreal, very fun. They were many of them, not all of them, but many of them were very kind. Scoble was very kind. Michael Arrington was a very gruff kind of, he would either be kind or a bit belligerent, but he went out. His actions spoke louder than his kind of temperament, and he was ultimately very kind to me and put me up and connected me to a lot of people, and I really appreciate that.
So in this, I'm just thinking we have companies from all over APAC, right? And I know the majority of them start selling locally into their own markets, and it seems like for you, your product, it kind of blew up and it expanded itself, at that particular time. But how do you know when the right time is to expand geographically?
Yeah, so the way I think about it is you should pick your target markets as deliberately as you're hopefully picking your features, and you're picking your team members, and you're picking your brand and your messaging. A lot of people tend to pick their target market and their first market, especially just based on where their butt is. It's like, where are they sitting? And my butt is in Australia right now, and so I bump into a lot of Australian founders, and I'll speak for Australia, and this may be frowned upon what I'm going to say, but Australia is very small, very risk averse, very capital poor, very talent poor, and not very creative in terms of looking and embracing new technologies and new ideas. And so I often will tell founders around here to not launch in Australia at all, to start in another market. Now, there are exceptions to every rule, right? If you're launching an Australian tourism app, or you're doing something that is uniquely Australian, that makes a lot of sense. But then you have to kind of ask yourself, why are you doing something that only, if it's software, it's hopefully infinitely scalable, globally scalable. How do you think about that in a different way? And so when you ask me when is the right time to go to another market, I would say day zero. If your market is not the first best market for your product. And the way you and then if it is, and then you want to figure out where to go next, then you've got to figure out what the playbooks are, figure out product market fit, get some traction, and then turn your attention to the others. The other thing I'd say is, you got to stack rank these markets by the same way you stack rank products and product features, right? Which market has the deepest pain and the deepest pockets and the largest market? And so that's what you want to do. And then finally, I'd say there's a story that's becoming a little bit urban legend now, but it's about, Travis was in a meeting talking about where the people were presenting to him which market they were going to go into next. And he kind of stopped the meeting as they were talking about this rubric of, well, we're going to figure out, public transport availability versus foot traffic versus socioeconomic, whatever. And he said, guys, stop. We're going to go into all the markets, all the cities. So come back to me with a plan to go into every city. And how are we going to scale that? And so that's where the launcher strategy came from, where there were playbooks and it was programmatized, and there was a real kind of a process by which they could spin up general managers into markets and go wide quickly. Of course, that was after they figured out a few things, but just that speaks to the ambition and scale that you can start to think about when you really hit your stride.
Yeah, and I guess at that point, did Uber have they sort of had that scalability already, and they were able to say, hey, you know what, we're just going into every market and we're just going to flood every market?
Yeah, well, it was two things. One is they obviously weren't going to actually go into every market, but what he was saying at the same exact time, but what he was saying was, you're not thinking ambitiously enough. How do we create a scalable program by which we can go after not one city at a time, but 2, 3, 4 cities at a time, 5, 7, 10 cities at a time, 20, and how do we start to ramp this thing? So basically his feedback was, think bigger, productize this, and programatize this. Certainly it was after they figured out, some of their core metrics, some of their core behaviors, they raised, a ton of money. But also I think founders think of this sometimes in the wrong order. They think once we have the money, once we have product market fit, then we can standardize and scale. And it's often the other way around. You need to actually narrow your focus, productize, programatize, and that gives you scale and growth, and it allows you to raise money from smart investors who believe in scale and growth, and that then lets you go supercharge globally. So oftentimes I'll hear, oh, we can't do that until we get big, or we can't do that until we raise money. And usually my argument is, no, it's the other way around. Have I got you still, Emily?
Yeah, you do.
Okay, your video is frozen.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, so it's basically like setting yourself up to have that scale, right, in the first place. It's setting up the processes, it's setting everything up for you to be able to scale out properly.
Yeah, and I actually wrote an entire deck about this. I forgot. I think it's like chrissaad.com/startupscale. I think is the address. But it talks about how in order to scale, you need to and scale should be the goal of every startup. You need to grow, obviously. But to grow, you need repeatability. And for repeatability, you need focus. And for focus, you need to say no to things. And this may sound really obvious, but I bump into so many founders who are saying yes to the wrong things. But this customer wants us to do this, and we could win this deal if we only add this feature. And we need to keep the lights on, so we need to close this deal, right? And really, you need to be much more precise about what use cases you're solving for what personas, what verticals, what markets, and narrow, and build repeatable, self-serve, delightful products.
Yeah, definitely. I think I think you've nailed one of the biggest challenges, facing product owners, I think. And that's, that was going to be my next question, is like, what have you personally come up against as a product owner yourself as the biggest challenge? And then what are you seeing in the market? I mean, I know you advise so many companies, and, at varying different levels of scale. What are some of those biggest challenges that people are facing?
Yeah, so the one I just described is definitely one of the biggest ones. That it's the founder with a big vision and a scarcity of capital will tend to embrace customer requirements, embrace the opportunity to close any deal or partnership in front of them, and diffuse their focus and dilute their polish and their repeatability and their productization and scale. And I find that is amongst the top cardinal sins that I see in the world, especially outside of Silicon Valley. Another one is the wrong business model, where again, especially outside of Silicon Valley, where companies will come at a problem via B2B, where they can feel like they can go to market via other businesses to improve the experience of customers. But their passion and their intent is to not improve the business necessarily, but improve the end user experience. But they think the channel to market is via the gatekeepers, the legacy businesses, the people who own the customers already. And they feel like they need to, what I call, prop up incumbents or partner with incumbents. And that's the wrong path from the Silicon Valley point of view. And I should have given this disclaimer at the beginning. All my advice is from a Silicon Valley high growth venture backed startup point of view. If you're building an organic growth, bootstrapped, non-software based startup company, my advice is 100% wrong. So
disregard everything.
Yeah, exactly. Do the opposite of what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, if you have a better way of doing something that a legacy industry is doing poorly, it is unlikely that industry, those entrenched incumbent interests, are going to move fast enough or well enough to adopt the principles and patterns you are proposing to them. And not only that, you don't want to do it that way because you don't own the end user. You don't have a relationship. You can't upsell, cross-sell, resell, monetize those end users. So it is often a mistake I see where they're going, instead of going via incumbents, what you want to do is you want to disrupt incumbents. You want to figure out who is doing it slow, fat, and wastefully, and figure out how to do it, fast, efficiently, and beautifully and delightfully. There's a wonderful tweet or something I saw, which was Uber didn't disrupt taxi because they had an app. They disrupted taxi because they gave a crap about their users. Airbnb didn't disrupt hotels because they had an app. They disrupted hotels because they gave a crap about users. And so just go direct to the users, give more of a crap than the legacy companies, use software first and first principles to disrupt them with better, more efficient solutions. So those are the two big sins I see a lot of. There's a lot of others that probably pop up as we talk.
Yeah, the big sins. Yeah, it's interesting. I think the creating value for your customer and having that as the first, that first point of call, like that's what we're doing first, ahead of anything else. And that's how you can really build off of those those legacy systems, which, like you said, it's nothing new. Uber wasn't some new great invention, and same with Airbnb. It was just like, okay, we made this absolutely so accessible and amazing, and everyone has to use it because it's just too good. Okay, I've got a question.
I'll add to that.
Yes.
And picking the right customer. So
Yes.
the customer may not be a business. It may be the business that you think is your partner or customer, may be the one you should be disrupting. And actually, sometimes, or even oftentimes, it's more valuable to go after the end customer directly. And oftentimes that's seen as harder or more, how do we get access to these customers and whatever. But, Facebook ads are cheap. And there are direct, growth marketing strategies to do that. What's expensive is spending forever toiling in obscurity, trying to prop up incumbents to do things better, while some Silicon Valley upstart comes in and eats your lunch going direct to consumer.
Mm-hmm.
That's more expensive.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I'm going to take a question from the audience. This is from Nico. So, how to balance the speed of scaling up and the quality of product that they give to their customers? Sometimes there's a trade-off with the quality. So let's say, for example, we think we don't have enough customer service, and adding one, they need more money, for example. So what's the balance there between, beautiful product polish, which you talk about all the time? You're always like, product polish, beautiful, stunning, and then the speed of scaling it.
Yeah, I would say that is a false dichotomy. It's a false tension. The way you scale is through beautiful, focused, delightful, self-adoptable product. So, and the way you get beautiful, delightful, self-adopt product is by narrowing your focus and doing one or a few things really, really well. So if you find yourself having too much surface area, then you're not focused enough. Too much surface area to polish, you should not focus enough. If you find yourself with too many support requests, then your product is not delightful enough, and maybe not even focused enough, and not polished enough. And so it is not either or. It's focus and polish your product so you can scale. It's one leads to the other.
Yeah. Yeah, great. No, it makes a lot of sense. I think especially when we're talking, we're talking about hyper growth startups, but we're not talking about Silicon Valley money, right? We're not talking about the same kind of, and you've seen it here being in Australia, and it's the same thing all, very much all around Asia Pacific, for the most part. Aside from obviously a couple of the bigger areas like China and India, which are, coming out with that kind of funding, there's not as much funding, and the growth is, it seems, that you hear about the deals that are being done in Silicon Valley, and I've been to Silicon Valley myself as well and seen it. It's, it's fast, it's quick, it's like scale fast. And I think here we're scaling, but it's slower. And the one question I get asked a lot, which is why I wanted to ask it to you, is what is your approach, and what have you seen work coming from both Silicon Valley and Australia experience? What's your approach to competition in the market at that point?
Well, let me answer your implied question as well, which is, what if these companies are capital constrained and they don't have access to that kind of capital? I would say solve that problem. Don't twist yourself into a pretzel trying to route around that problem. So go find the money. That means, I know it sounds easier said than done, and people might say, well, this guy's crazy. Find friends, family, fools, angels, VCs that believe in scale and growth, and pitch them a product and a business that is designed for scale and growth. Because if you go the other way, you will be, as I said, they will eat your lunch. They will disrupt you, or rather they'll disrupt the incumbents you're trying to prop up. And they'll build a business where they own the customer, own the brand, own the platform, and you've got some enterprise SaaS software. Can you imagine if Uber built better dispatch software for taxi? That's not a $50 billion company, right? That's a couple $100 million company. So if you're trying to build a Silicon Valley style high growth software venture backed company, go do that. Stop pretending you're doing that. As it relates to competition, and you asked me how do you deal with competition, I have multiple answers to that. Number one is, if you don't have any competition, that's a problem, because you have no one else out there educating the market. There's no category, maybe there's no real problem. So don't go look at something, oh, there's competition there, we shouldn't go do that. It's okay to have competition, and it's okay to learn from your competition, borrow some ideas from your competition, and you have to out execute your competition and beat them, do better. In Silicon Valley, in some cases, not all cases, competitors actually talk to each other because they realize that they're actually the world is massive. It's like 7 billion people, and they're actually going after different slices of the pie. So because there's such abundance and such big picture thinking, they're like, well, you're really focused more on this angle and this thing, and we're really more focused on this thing. Let's figure out how we can help, or how we can cooperate. That's not everybody, of course, but that is how, to the degree in which it's the opposite of Australia and some other markets, where it's like, oh my God, there's competition, we can't talk to them, we hate them. And so it's sometimes even the opposite of that. The other thing I'd say is, I see a lot of companies in APAC copying without understanding. It's kind of like, well, like I had someone say to me, well, they had read the Amazon story, and they read how Reed Hastings wanted to do streaming, but he knew the technology wasn't ready, so he did DVD mailing first. And so he said that was their wedge, that was their MVP, and then they switched to streaming when the technology was ready. And so we're going to go do this B2B SaaS thing, and then when we're ready, that's our wedge, and then when we're ready, we're going to go do this more amazing B2C marketplace. And I said, that's not the same thing. You've taken the wrong lesson from Reed Hastings' story. If Netflix had done what you're doing, they would have built CRM software for video stores. Like, they would have helped Blockbuster do DVD rentals. It's like the route to the B2C marketplace utopia is not via Blockbuster. It's via, and so it's that's my point around competition. Competition is healthy. Figure out how you're going to beat them and how you're going to focus into a niche that's different than theirs, different market, different persona, different angle. Maybe they're coming from the enterprise down, and you're going to go from the small bits teams up. Figure out some other different go-to-market approach. Maybe they're the more sophisticated version. You're the simpler, easier, more beautiful version. Figure out your differentiator. But then also, when you're borrowing, good artists borrow, great artists steal. When you're borrowing and stealing, make sure you're learning the right lessons and not just copying with that understanding.
Yeah, that I think absolutely nailed it. It's so important that just keeping the focus, I think, is one of the biggest things, isn't it? It's just so huge. I did it myself. I didn't stay focused. I know that, I've made those sort of mistakes myself in the past, and it's so important. So I think that message to me is really coming through.
Yeah. For focus, and I see that everywhere. You're not alone. Where a part of my job is just joining every week in the strategic meetings and reminding the team of the strategy, because within 1 week there is strategy drift, and their tactics drift off the strategy we agreed to 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks ago. And so 5, 10%, 20% of my job, depending on the team, is just holding the team accountable to their strategy. Now, one of the ways I remain focused, especially in the product world, is to ask myself one question over and over again. What is the number one reason more users are not being more successful with my product more often? That's it. So that question will often immediately invalidate a whole bunch of tasks on your backlog. like refactoring code and building some notification feature over there and building this other thing instead of this other, it immediately turns it around. If more people are not being more successful more often because they don't know about us, then your problem is marketing, and you need to do more marketing. If the number one reason is that people are learning about you but not signing up, then your problem is your message or your framing. If people are signing up and bouncing, then your problem is your onboarding flow. If they're signing up and getting started but they're not retaining, then your problem is some features in the retention, and your time to value and your whatever, maybe your marketing automation. And if they're sticking around for a while but they're not paying, then maybe your pricing strategy sucks. I'm being very reductive here, right? But figure out where that number one churn point is, where more people are not being more successful more often, and just solve it. And then repeat. Ask yourself the question again, and then solve it and repeat. And it's just like, it's pretty. It's the philosophy is easy. The implementation is hard. But that's one of the simple tools I use with myself and with my teams.
That's great. All right, cool. Okay, we've got another question which I just completely missed. All right, Araf from Bangladesh. The question is, should you launch a product first and then polish it, or launch it only when it's fully ready for the target consumer group?
Yeah. So let me talk about that through the lens of MVP. People often think that an MVP. Let me go back a step. Imagine that the problem you're solving is getting from A to B. We want to help people get from A to B. The ideal solution to that might be a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. It's gorgeous, it's flashy, it's powerful, it's amazing. And so the product is the Lamborghini. Most people think, or at least act, like the MVP, right? The minimum viable product is 4 wheels. And they kind of ship 4 wheels, and those wheels are kind of janky. And nobody can ride the wheels. There's no steering wheel, there's no pedals, there's no user manual. The actual MVP is a scooter, is a push-powered scooter. And that does not mean it's a crap scooter. It means it's a beautifully designed scooter with replacement tires and great little traction strip on the on the panel, and it's got a box and a brand and a user manual and a support desk and a way to and a website and a purchasing flow and a returns desk. Like, that's the MVP, is the entire minimum viable product. And then you iterate from there. Have I got you still, Emily, because your video is frozen as well?
Yeah.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, so when the question implies a kind of dichotomy that doesn't exist. You need to ship a polished, small, minimum product. Now, prior to doing that, you might do some user research, you might put some click-through demos in front of people, you might put up a landing page and see if anyone cares, you might do some early testing with a kind of broken, janky beta. But when you release that product, that narrow, minimum viable product should be polished, beautiful, delightful, and ready to scale. And then you iterate from there.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Hopefully that answers your question, Araf, as well. And reminder, anyone, just feel free to post questions whenever you want. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep asking my own. And I mean, I'm going to be learning stuff that I want to know, so that I can use in my consulting conversations.
I'm educating the competition. Oh no, that's right. Competition is okay. I heard that somewhere on a fireside chat.
So having been in pretty big product roles, what are the most important decisions that you make as a product owner? What are the most important things that you know, for instance, at Uber, the most important product decisions versus at your startup, you know, because they're very different, right? They're two very different things.
Hmm. Um, I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the most important decision you make is what is your MVP? What is your target persona, the target market, the thing that you're going to focus on first? But let me say something different to add to the story a little bit. Once you've done all that, and those are the most important decisions, the other important thing I find is it's okay to design the Ferrari or design the Lamborghini. In fact, I do that all the time. I will design what I call version 3. It doesn't matter what version it is, version 5, version 10, version 1000, but I just call it my V3 design or my ideal design. And I design that and I put a lot of love into that and I figure out what is this thing that I really, really dream I want to build. And then I work backwards. I pare that away and pare that away and pare that away and figure out what is the MVP, what is that minimum thing. And so I find if you don't do that and you have capital scarcity, and it's insufficient capital, you have a founder who is chasing every deal they can find, which is a rational behavior if you have capital scarcity, although it's the wrong behavior. And you have big enterprise customers who are pulling you in every direction. That North Star design and the roadmap that you create out of it by working backwards to the MVP and creating this beautiful roadmap to where you want to get, that acts as a kind of anchor. It stops you from as a product manager and your product team, and thereby extension your engineering team. It stops you from getting thrashed, because if the next client says, "Hey guys, can you do this other feature that we would love?" You're like, you can say to the CEO or to yourself or to the customer, "If we go do this other thing, we're not going to go do these 15 other polished things that are going to allow us to scale and ship these adjacent features." And so do you want to scale this product to thousands of customers, or do you want to bloat this product to this one guy or girl who wants to give us some money? And so having a strong vision, a strong roadmap, a strong opinion anchors you from being thrashed. I find a lot of people, especially in APAC, a lot of product managers are actually acting as account managers and project managers. Project managers have no opinion. They triage and arbitrage catastrophes and emergencies. Product managers have opinions, and they say no far more often than they say yes. And they say no from a place of principled objection. And the way you get principled objection is by having product principles and a product roadmap that the company has bought into and has alignment behind. Now, this doesn't mean you're just making everything up and you ignore the outside world. It means you collect data and you refine your worldview. And that data might be usage data, it might be market feedback, it might be research, it might be trends, it might be customers, it might be your own intuition, your own executive team, your investors. Data comes from everywhere. But your job as a product leader is to triangulate an opinion based on all of that data. Otherwise, you're just an account manager or a project manager, and you're just like a flag flapping in the wind.
Flag, yeah. No, I mean, how do you find working? I mean, do you bring in when you're developing your product roadmap, are you bringing in engineering from the very start? Do you bring the technical team in from the get-go, make sure everyone's on the same page, and then there's no sort of, that I see this quite a bit as well, where it's like, oh, well, the CTO wants to do this, but the CEO wants to do that, and, the CEO's oversold something, and then you're kind of like,
Well, I have a couple of articles I've written on my website in the Startup Advice blog that addresses this. One of them is called "Engineers Make Terrible Product Managers," and the other one was "Don't Listen to Your Sales Team." And they're deliberately provocative headlines, and I don't mean them literally. And in the body, it explains the nuance. Engineers can actually make fantastic product managers when their job is product management and not engineering. But when they're in the role of engineering, their job is to figure out what's hard and figure out the pragmatic realities and get mired in the details. And so their perspective is different than product. And the sales team, their job is to like close deals and hit KPIs, and so their perspective is different than product. So what I do is I collect all the data. That's all the data I just listed, right? Behavior data, trend data, competitive data, data from sales and what customers want, data from engineering and what the system does, data from the CEO, what the board wants, and then I triangulate my truth and promptly disregard everyone else's opinion. So let me be a little bit provocative. I don't give a crap what engineering thinks is possible. I just don't care. And I'll tell you why. It's not because I don't respect engineering. It's because I respect them so much. I know that they're wizards and they can make anything happen. The question is, what do I want my end user to experience? That's pretty much the only thing that matters. And then, and only then, do I go to engineering and say, let's figure this out. Where are we able to make some trade-offs? Okay, if that's hard, let's break that for version 2, break that off as version 2, but I'm not going to be derailed from my roadmap and my strategy. We can do this simple version now, which is a stepping stone to this other more complicated version, but I'm not going to get deflected off in some other direction. And I'm going to stay the course. And so the short answer to your question is I consult with everybody. I triangulate my product strategy, and then I kind of disregard everybody's opinion from that point forward. Again, always listening for feedback, always humble and open to course correct, but I cannot be a flag flapping in the wind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've got to, you have to put your strategy down and sort of, you at least have to have somewhere that you go, all right, this is actually happening. This is the way we're doing it. Otherwise, it's just a mess, right? And
by the way, there's a step in there that I probably skipped over. It's very important. You collect all the data, you design your V3 and your roadmap, and you maybe work backwards to your MVP. Then you socialize it and drive alignment, and that's an important step. So you go show engineering, the sales, the CEO, the team. You get them excited about the strategy. You get them bought into it. You make small course corrections and adjustments and refinements based on their feedback. But you get everybody to not sign off, but get emotionally invested in this strategy. And then they will naturally, you will naturally see them give you less disruptive, distracting asks. And you will have a tool to mitigate the remaining distractions that you encounter.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. That's amazing advice. I'm also going to use that. Okay, does anyone have questions? Anything you want to hear more about from Chris? Knowing what you know, if anyone sort of missed his bio at the beginning, Chris is just an amazing product person in general. Just all of the things startup, and I think you have this great blend of, you've had your own things and then you also had a massive role at Uber, and I think everyone wants to learn from what the big startups have done, obviously, because they go, all right, they've done it, how do I do it? I mean, you were at Uber for a couple of years?
Yeah. So yeah, I was there for 2.5, 3 years. Not at the very beginning, but in the early days. I think I got before their fifth birthday. So I was like 4.5 years into their journey. So I can't take credit for their initial explosive growth. but I certainly contributed my little piece. I would say, yeah, people look at my resume and they look at Uber and that's the shiniest thing, and they think a lot of my advice comes from Uber. A lot of my work and my thinking comes from having done it myself, failed at everything miserably, learned how to do it the right way, the hard way, and then learned how to do it an even better way at Uber, where they kind of recalibrated my brain in terms of what high quality, and high hustle execution looks like. And so I learned through contrast. I saw what I did, what most founders do. I saw what Uber did, and it was that contrast that allowed me to create the lessons out of it. And the other thing I noticed, especially in Australia, maybe it's true for the rest of APAC, there's a lot of coaches and mentors and advisors who've never built anything. And I just would caution. I'm a builder. I'm an entrepreneur. I just happen to be doing some advisory and consulting now. But you don't want to watch out for career advisors. You want to kind of get your advice from the right places, I'd say.
That is also excellent advice, and one of my major learnings as well, even though this fireside chat is absolutely not about me, but there's something, there you go, was that I've also had that experience with, with career advisors who have never built anything, and it is really, it is really tough to get the right advice. So that is, I've never heard anyone say it, but I think it's absolutely so true. It's funny because you started talking about that you failed a bunch of times. My second to last question that I want to ask you was, what have you failed, and what did you learn, and how do we better embrace failure?
So, just one last point on the choosing your advisor thing and choosing your advice.
Yeah.
Drive-by advice is not usually wrong, but it's difficult for it to be right, because first you need to figure out your strategy, and then you need to make all of your decisions aligned with your medium to long-term strategy. So there's do the unscalable thing. Don't scale at all costs. Revenue is important. Revenue is not important. And there's the opposite advice for everything. The reason there's an opposite advice for everything is because it all depends. It depends on what your strategy is and what your circumstances are. So knowledge is information in context. Wisdom is knowledge in context. It's knowing when to apply the right information at the right time for the right situation. And so just be careful of drive-by advice, even from amazing people, because they're just giving you some random thought chunk that doesn't necessarily align with your broader goals. In regards to failure, people often say failure is okay and you're going to fail and then don't worry. I have a slightly different answer to that. Failure is not okay. Failure is essential. Failure is literally part of the process. It's impossible to succeed without failing, because what you're supposed to be doing is having a series of hypotheses, testing them with customers and the market, figuring out which one works. So if you're figuring out which one works, by definition, some of them have to fail, right? That's the scientific method. And so failure is not okay. It's an okay option. Don't be upset. If you're not failing and failing fast, you're not innovating and you're not figuring out the right path. So I would say you need to go develop hypotheses, test those hypotheses, figure out which ones succeed, which ones fail. And one way to say this is fall in love with the problem, not the solution. So if you want to get people from A to B, you might, in your head, you're like, I want to build a Ferrari, I want to build a Ferrari, I want to build a Ferrari. That's falling in love with the solution. Fall in love with the problem. The first solution is a scooter. The next solution is an electric scooter. The next solution is a little little hatchback. The next solution is maybe like a hot hatch, sporty hatch. The next one is a sedan, you know. And so you iterate your way, you fail your way to the ideal outcome. So failure is essential.
Yeah, I absolutely love that answer. It's so good. I think it happens to everyone, right? And I feel like
I
we
would
don't
say
do
it
a good job
happens,
though
it
of
happens
embracing
to
it.
every. I'm sorry. I'll say I think failure happens to every successful person. If
Mm,
you are in your day job and you know you have a 9 to 5 and you get a paycheck, maybe it doesn't happen to you because you're not outside your comfort zone. You're not trying anything. So
yeah, totally. I think do you see that, I mean, people say this a lot, right? That it's much more accepted in Silicon Valley to fail, and then you just start your next startup, and here it's quite different, right? And so we're not embracing failure as much.
yeah, so there you're talking about like company failure, right? Like not failing something you're trying and
Yeah.
experimenting or feed there's kind of it's a more catastrophic failure of the company. I would say two things. One is if you don't try, and everyone on this call, I assume, is already trying. They're already entrepreneurs, so I'm not telling you anything new. But the way I think about it is if you don't try to follow your dreams and your ideas, you will fail 100% of the time. You will fail because you don't even try. So the way I think about failure and risk is not, well, if I try, I might fail. It's like if I don't try, I am guaranteed to fail. So by just the mere act of trying, I've reduced my probability of failure. It's kind of inside out. In terms of the company failing and the culture that you're in, all I can say to that is either surround yourself with great people who have an abundance mindset and who believe in failure as part of the process. And there are those people in every ecosystem, every market. I found some in Brisbane, which is a very small town that doesn't really understand Silicon Valley. And that the Silicon Valley mindset has propagated out to the rest of the world in a to a degree, to a little degree. And if you can't find that, pre-COVID, pre some of the politics and the culture wars, my first best advice was get up and move to the US. Like just go. Go spend at least a month there to start, then spend 2 or 3 or 4 months there, then move there. And I know that sounds, in some cases, that might be my privilege showing. You know, I have a great passport. Australia's got a great passport and a kind of the ESTA program where you can go for 3 months basically very easily. You know, maybe it's I'm showing my privilege in terms of having the money to go do that. But I would say I did not have the money to do that. I had a credit card. I don't even know how I got the credit card. It's the first credit card you get from the bank as a kid, and I maxed out my credit card to go to the US, and I didn't even know how I was going to pay it off at the time. And so, you know, I'm sure what I'm saying that there's some angle, you know, some aspect of that just that kind of has a lot of privilege built in. But to the degree possible, find your like-minded people, whether they've gone to the US and come back and they've brought that attitude with them, or they pay close attention to the Silicon Valley culture, and or they just inherently have an abundance nature. You are the average of the 5 people you hang out with. So if anyone, I'll give you an example. My friends, my high school friends, were very well-meaning people, very sweet, well-meaning people. They did not mean to hurt me or pull me down, but their priorities were nice houses, nice cars, leaving home, getting a job at a stable company like Telstra, you know, the local telco, earning a big fat paycheck, and raising family in the safe suburbs. That was their priorities. So anything that was not that, they kind of joked about or derided or undervalued or changed the subject away from, or said, "Oh, Chris, you overthink things," or "Oh, Chris, when are you going to stop living at home and go get a real job?" Not in a mean way, just in a trying to help me kind of way. Like, "Oh, you're so smart. You should have a BMW by now." And it's like, you need to hang out with different people to get different results. And so just watch out for that. Watch out for that.
And now you have a Lamborghini.
Well, I put my time in. I made my tiny dent on the world. I enjoyed building a lot of stuff, and I'll go back and do those things. But now, this moment in my life, I am optimizing for lifestyle and cars and things. But that was after a lot of like, deal me back in, deal me back in, deal me back in. Like I'll push back gratification. I'll push back gratification, and it's only just paying off in the last few years.
I wanted to drop in the Lamborghini because I want everyone to know that you've just got your new car.
I don't want to. That totally undermines my credibility as
We'll post
scrappy.
pictures later. Okay, I've got a couple of questions from the audience. All right, so Rizma has asked, what is the best way to deliver a product? I'm hearing that copying an already built one and modifying based on business needs is a good one. Is that right?
The best way to build a product is to find a problem in the world that has a great deal of waste, inefficiency, and pain for a large and growing group of people who have deep enough pockets to pay for the solution and to solve that problem well. Very, very ideally, you care deeply about those people and their problem. So it's very ideal that you care about that problem yourself personally. That's very ideal. And because it's going to be a very painful journey and you need to care. But the best way is not to copy, not to just copy and localize, not to borrow from some competition. The best way is to find pain and inefficiency and waste, disrupt the people who are causing the pain, inefficiency, and waste, and solve the problem in delightful, cost-effective ways using the latest, or at least modern technology and principles and patterns and business models.
Awesome. Thank you. I hope that answers the question. Okay, next one. So Araf says, working on rebranding of their app. It's an e-commerce platform. What advice would you have for someone who's getting into product and only recently started working with it? Or on it, I suppose.
Yeah. So imagine you're building a house and you have a bunch of engineers and designers and carpenters and bricklayers and plumbers. They're running around the site, the bit of land where you're building the house. Maybe you even have a site foreman, right? The guy who's telling the plumbers and the tile layers and the carpenters what to do. And you're the customer. You're like, I got a site foreman and I've got a bunch of plumbers and tilers. I'm good. They're going to build a beautiful house for me. That's what happens if you are the CEO and founder and all you have is a CTO and a bunch of engineers. You have a bunch of technicians, craftspeople, amazing, smart, talented people building some random crap. What you need is an architect, not an engineering architect. You need in the form, if you think about the building a house, you need someone with taste.
Have we frozen? Could be, have we frozen? These are the joys of the technical joys. All right, I think we've lost Chris, but I'm not 100%. Oh, yes. Okay, great. We did lose Chris, but we're back.
Hey, we were doing so well.
We were doing so well.
I don't know what you heard last.
I don't know either. I think
It was about
uh,
we're talking about the architect. I don't know if you got to what part of the building metaphor we got to, but um, in terms of
yes.
if you're just getting into product.
Yeah, and we spoke about the fact that you have a CEO, you have a CTO, and then you just have a bunch of people that are
Yeah, running around. Yeah, yeah.
masters of their craft.
Yes, but they're building a bunch, like a kind of random assortment of stuff. And so what you need is an architect who has taste and who has style and who has intuition to design a beautiful blueprint for your home that tells a story, so that when you come in the front door and then you opens up to the lounge room and it creates certain spaces. And so think of a product management like that. If you're building a business, a software startup, you do not have a product manager and a product strategy, it's like you're running around building, you're cutting wood and nailing in panels and you're laying tiles, but you don't have an architect. You don't have someone to tell all those beautiful craftspeople what to do to tell a cohesive narrative, to have a cohesive customer journey. So when you say to me you're just now getting into product, I would say you're probably you're late. Better late than never. Find a great product person to help you, because it is an art as much as it is a science, and experience and intuition will really help. And it'll help you stop from wasting time and fast forward to the best answers as quickly as possible. It will cost more money, but it will save you wasted time and wasted expenses on all those craftspeople doing the wrong thing.
Amazing. Okay, so I'm going to ask the last question because I know we're out of time. The where is it? Ahmed. Okay, so most times building the scooter in the world of Ferraris, there's fear of getting crushed by competition. Any advice how to navigate that situation?
Yeah. So if you build a big, broad platform trying to keep up with the competition, it's the likelihood is you're going to get crushed by the competition because your product sucks. It claims to do a lot of stuff, but it's not an established brand with an established customer base, with an established support system, with half-baked features and half-baked garbage, and you're going to get crushed by the competition anyway. The only way to beat the competition, I won't say only because I hyperbole absolutes are wrong. It is more likely you're going to beat the competition if you let them position themselves as the big, complicated, sophisticated, heavy legacy player, and you position yourself as the small, nimble, beautiful, polished alternative. And so use your lack of features to your advantage. Say, those guys are big, heavy, fat, and slow. We are small, nimble, beautiful, and focused. And until you get to be the big, fat, slow, heavy legacy player, you play that card. And then when you become more sophisticated and complex, you can point to the little guys and go, oh, those guys aren't comprehensive and they don't have all the features you need. So you play a different go-to-market strategy depending on the stage of product you're at.
Yeah, it's really about the story you tell as well, right? At that time.
I mean, let me say something that might be a little bit also inappropriate to talk about on a Microsoft call. Look at Slack versus Teams, right? The argument is, well, yeah, Microsoft is fantastic, but they're big and slow and whatever. Slack, we're small and nimble and focused, and that worked for a long, long time. Right now, Microsoft is kicking their butt, and because they got their act together, right? But the point is that slow, focused, nimble player was a multi-billion-dollar company before the big behemoth Microsoft got focused. And so there's a way to play that game. Maybe I'm going to get assassinated by the Microsoft people, but that's the way to think about it.
No, I agree with you. I mean, it's only now, right? Only so recently has Teams overtaken Slack, and have put the development time and the product polish into it. And before then, it was, well, no one wants to use it because it's not polished. And Slack was like, well, just come and use us because we're really easy to use, really simple to deploy. It's open for everyone. No worries.
That's right. And even in these major companies, I always thought of these major companies like they act with a single voice. One of the mistakes I used to make when I was young was like, oh, Facebook did this. Oh, Microsoft did this. Isn't that great or isn't that terrible? They're not monolithic entities. They're individual people trying their best in small little teams trying their best. And each of those teams have their own little culture, their own little goals. And so if the team are not focused, not building polished product, not listening to the customer, they will get beaten by the Slack team. And it's a very kind of democratic in that way. And so you have to play the hand you're dealt and the story you're in, and even massive companies have limited resources.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think just because those companies have, they have tons and tons of products, right? It's not just one product. That's the thing. With Microsoft, Teams isn't our only product, obviously. Doing a bunch of other stuff as well. And so, yeah, you're right. Like the Teams team is, I don't know how big it is, but it's, it's potentially smaller than the Slack team. I think it probably is. So, it's really interesting. And you can, I think you sort of can go up against the bigger guys and still, still win a big share of the market.
But you can't if your product is crappy, hard to use, hard to onboard, and not it's a kind of imitation of some other big behemoth, overcomplicated piece of crap. So it's much better to play that speedboat strategy of being in the focus strategy.
Definitely. Well, we're over time, so I'm gonna let you go because I feel bad that I'm taking up so much of your time. But I think you've got lots of great resources on your website, right? So I think that would be somewhere people could look.
Yeah, just follow me on all the social media. I'm just at Chris Saad on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and everything. My domain is chrissaad.com. I'm here to kind of be a sounding board, and I work with a small handful of companies in a formal advisory capacity. That's a kind of more paid engagement, but that's good for kind of funded startups that are looking to get very serious about growing very fast.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here and all your wisdom. I learned a lot. I hope everyone else learned a lot.
Thank you, everybody. Hopefully that was helpful, and I didn't offend too many people. And I look forward to hearing from everybody.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, bye.
Thank you. See ya.
See ya.
Thanks, everyone, for being here. It's been great, and hopefully you enjoyed it. All right. I think we're good. Thank you.